The last video that I made was about the fact that the state of Battlefield 6 vehicles is questionable to say the least. And so following that trend, today's video is going to be talking about all of the loadouts that you can use in terms of the vehicles that actually have customization, cough cough, and also touching on the fact that, unsurprisingly, half the upgrades on here either directly don't work or don't work the way they say they do, or worst of all, work the opposite way that they say they're supposed to. So unfortunately today, Battlefield 6 will not be shaking the shoved out the door way too early because GTA 6 got delayed allegations. Anyways, I don't want to waste any more of your time, so let's just go down the list of vehicles, talk about the options you've got, and talk about which ones are the best. Starting with MBTs, and these are probably the most well-rounded and probably the most success you're generally going to get out of land vehicles especially. My current build that I've got for the MBT is the high explosive for the primary ammo, the aim guided for the secondary ammo, the HMG for my coaxial, APS, reinforced plating, the LMG, and the mine countermeasures. That being said, let's talk about the other options that you could pick and why I went with the ones that I did. In terms of shell ammo, this one's pretty cut and dry. The high explosive is obvious. It does the most damage to infantry, and a lot of the time when you're in a vehicle, you're gonna have infantry sitting behind cover trying to take pot shots at you with RPGs. And having the high explosive shell that does the most splash damage is pretty much a no-brainer. If you're not using this, you're probably in trouble, unless of course you're a diehard to the anti-personnel canister shot, but I don't really vibe with that and much prefer the high explosive. In terms of the other options that I didn't use in the category, the multi-purpose shell is all but useless. It's the best of no worlds, and considering that the tank is capable of running two different shells, the multi-purpose shell just serves no use unless you consistently forget to change your shells out for the situation. The armor-piercing shell fares a little bit better, with a significantly faster travel time than the other shells in the category, as well as of course doing a little bit more extra damage to armored vehicles. The main problem I ran into this one, unfortunately, was the fact that, as I've shown in a previous video, the hit detection on this thing is questionable. Where the hit detection isn't questionable though is in my second choice of shells, and that's the guided ammunition. The aim guided ammo, to put it simply, is it's a little bit broken. This ammunition is effectively the IFV's tow missile but put onto a tank, which is something that a tank realistically should not have access to in a Battlefield game, but it does. This allows you to snipe targets from significantly further away with borderline 100% consistency because you don't need to compensate for any sort of drop or anything. The shell itself appears to do very similar damage to the multi-purpose round, but most importantly, the shell is able to hit aircraft and aerial targets very easily because DICE decided to make the tow missiles and aim-guided weapon systems in this game usable by toddlers, so it's extremely easy to blast down helicopters with the aim-guided shell, and that's one of the big reasons for using it. Moving over to the secondary weapons, in terms of whether or not you want to pick the LMG or the HMG, this is really a matter of preference, so I'm not going to make a huge argument for one or the other. I personally feel like I switch by the day, depending on what I feel like using. The HMG is generally better at range, but worse up close, and most importantly in third person, and considering I play in a lot of third person, I often use the LMG. It's really up to you. I recommend just giving both of them a shot and deciding on which one you like better. Now, here's where things get a little bit complicated, because the next thing is the choice between the projectile intercept system, or APS, versus the thermal blocking smoke. I can see arguments for both the APS and the smoke here. Unfortunately though, I can't see the arguments for the emergency repair, and I would recommend you stay away from this thing like the plague. If you don't know what emergency repair does, basically if your tracks get disabled or you reach a critical state, which means that your health bar is red and you're on fire, you can use it to gain an immediate little health bonus and restore your systems. The problem is using this once again locks you out of APS and thermal smoke, which are integral to the tank's toolkit, and if you don't have these, you're just signing your own death warrant. Now, anyways, as I've mentioned in the previous video, APS in this game is very flawed. It barely lasts any time at all. It has a startup window, which means that reacting to lock-ons that are coming oftentimes just doesn't work, and the cooldown is really long. That being said, it still acts like APS. If you do get to activate it in time, it still is basically an immortality button to just about everything in the game, and because of that, while you can't use APS directly to push objectives necessarily in this game, it's still good for retreating after taking a bunch of damage. That's the main usage that I get out of it personally, and there's a couple times that it saved my life, so generally I keep it on. As I mentioned though, I can see people making arguments for the thermal smoke, and here's the ones that I would make. First of all, and most obvious, is the fact that the cooldown for it is significantly less, so you can use smoke a lot more often. Generally speaking, if you throw down a smoke wall, it's good for a lot of things, whether it be blocking your teammates' approach or covering your own retreat, along with the most obvious thing, which is directly misguiding enemy lock-on missiles. With the thermal smoke, if you hear a missile coming, you can immediately smoke and it's going to break it off every time, unlike the APS, where if it's coming too fast, you're just going to get hit before the thing activates. So considering the fact that you have it more often, it can be used in a lot of the same ways, just without necessarily the same effectiveness. I can see why people would pick the smoke, but I'd still recommend the APS if you can get used to it, because invincibility is cool. Moving forward, here's where we get into the bugs, because unfortunately several of the upgrades for the land vehicle and air vehicle categories that we'll be getting to just don't work properly, so let's get into it. Going down the list, we start with field maintenance, probably the most broken out of all of these. The tooltip says that it enables faster vehicle health recovery after taking damage, and will also gain ammo sooner and faster. Now, that said, the first sentence on there is a complete lie, because the vehicle does not have a faster recovery time after taking damage. It is identical whether you're using this upgrade or you're not. It takes the same time to start the automatic health regen, and it takes the same time to heal the amount of automatic health regen, making this upgrade basically just completely useless. But you may be thinking, all right, well, the automatic health regen doesn't work, but what about the gaining ammo sooner and faster? This might be helpful if you're constantly running out of ammo and you don't like sitting on a resupply point for 8 hours. Like, for example, if you're in the IFV, something that is still broken and still takes you 3 straight minutes of sitting at a resupply to get all your ammo back. Dice, please. Anyways, it does work in the fact that you do get your ammo back sooner, which means that there's a higher threshold that you get below before it starts automatically giving your ammo back. The problem is that the faster part is false advertising, because it doesn't give you your ammo back faster, it gives you your ammo back slower. Why in God's name does it take 8 more seconds to get ammo back on the upgrade that says it makes your ammo come back faster? Needless to say, field maintenance is a scam. It's something that is on the tank by default, and you should get rid of it immediately, because it is not even remotely worth your time. Moving forward, we can talk about the reinforced plating. This is what I generally go with in the tank and really every vehicle, and you'll see why. The reinforced plating says that it gives you additional armor that improves resistance to all damage, but reduces max speed and acceleration. The thing about that last part that says it reduces max speed and acceleration, yeah, that's also a lie. That doesn't do anything. So basically, what reinforced plating does is it provides a 15% damage resistance for no drawback. So there's literally no reason to not run this. Survivability in ground vehicles is already low. Being able to take just 1 extra rocket is incredibly important, and the fact that it quite literally does nothing to your speed, there's no reason not to run this. Moving forward, let's talk about the enhanced loading system. It says that it increases the primary weapon rate of fire and improves secondary weapon heat recovery. It also mentions that the system deactivates when the vehicle health is reduced, which seems asinine, and I'll be talking about why in just a second here. The shocking part about this is the fact that it actually works. I genuinely believed that this was going to be bugged, like most of the other things on here, but no, it generally gives you around a 20% decreased loading time, along with a reduced overheat time. Although I will mention that this overheat time applies after the gun has been fully overheated. And most baffling of all, it really does disable when you get down to low HP. That said, this drawback, I'm not sure why it's even here, because the 20% decreased loading time on the weapons and the decreased heat buildup is not all that helpful, and not nearly as helpful as the 15% overall damage reduction. And the fact of the matter is, the heat buildup thing is almost negligible anyway, because if you've managed to get past the bugged challenges and unlocked the combat engineer specialization, the very first upgrade on there makes it so that way any of your vehicle weapons take an eternity to overheat anyway, making this once again completely redundant. Enhanced loading works, but I wouldn't recommend it. Moving over to something that doesn't work though, and the final thing on the list for main battle tanks is the optimized handling. This says that it improves the vehicle turning rate and aiming speed. But the question of the day, does it improve the vehicle's turning rate and aiming speed? No. No, it doesn't. Optimized handling literally does nothing at all. So needless to say, do not equip the upgrade that literally does nothing. That's probably not going to help you a whole lot. Finally, getting out of upgrades, we can talk about the Gunner weapon systems. This is once again one of those things that's up to preference, and more importantly, a lot of the time up to preference in terms of who's in your gunner seat. I think if you want to err on the side of caution, the LMG generally can be one of the better choices because it has a very long overheat time and shoots a lot of bullets, which means that if you get some trash can blueberry that hops into your vehicle, they can just shoot a bunch of bullets downrange, and even if they hit one or two, it's more helpful than missing every single shot on the HMG. And that same exact logic applies to the grenade launcher, which is honestly probably an even better option if you're just relying on trash cans all the time in order to be your gunner seat. Grenade launchers got explosive damage, they don't need to direct impact enemies, and it's honestly not too bad. Either way, I don't have a direct recommendation. Whatever your gunner likes or whatever you want to throw on here, you're not going to be using it, so it's up to them. What is important, though, is the secondary equipment for the gunner. Here you get a choice between a deployable smoke wall or mine countermeasures, and the choice here is pretty obvious. The odds of running into somebody who's capable of using the smoke wall effectively is slim to none. Don't get me wrong, it's a good ability, and if you have somebody in your gunner seat who knows what they're doing, you can make great use of the smoke wall, not only for yourself, but also for your teammates to push objectives. That said, there's two big problems. The first is the most obvious, which is the fact that you generally are not going to have a good gunner in your tank all the time, and so they're either never going to use the smoke wall, or if they do use it, it's probably just going to hurt you rather than help you. And the other thing to consider is the fact that because landmines are on the default for any engineer right now, everyone's throwing landmines absolutely everywhere. And the mine countermeasures are really, really helpful in that case. What the mine countermeasures do is that if you have someone in your gunner seat, it automatically spots and highlights on your screen enemy landmines or C4s. The gunner also has access to an ability where if they activate it and there's any landmines or explosives near your vehicle, it will just automatically destroy them. Now the thing is, obviously, most of your gunners are never going to know what this does, they're never going to use it effectively, but that's fine because as long as they're in there, it's going to always detect the mines and you can always take them out yourself. It's pretty much a no-brainer here, would highly recommend countermeasures. Moving out of MBTs, let's talk about the IFVs. This, once again, is extremely cut and dry. In terms of the primary weapon systems, I basically only would ever pick the high explosive, and there's just about zero reason to pick any of the other ones. The anti-personnel is actively throwing the game. If you equip the anti-personnel, you now can't damage vehicles basically at all, and you've just thrown your ability to do something very important, which is fight against enemy vehicles. Now you can't do it. Good luck. The armor piercing, on the other hand, has some niche use cases, and I can see you maybe putting this on if your team is constantly getting rolled by vehicles and all you have access to is maybe an IFV and a couple tanks and the enemy team has all of the vehicles under control. Because the armor piercing shells are capable of doing good damage to enemy vehicles, the problem of course being the fact that they have no splash damage at all, and so when it comes to killing infantry, you have to get direct hits, and on a moving target that can be easier said than done. Especially when you consider the fact that just like with the MBTs, a lot of people like to hide behind cover and shoot rockets and then immediately hide behind cover again. The IFV is really good at fletching people out of that cover with the high explosive shell. But if you don't have the high explosive shell, then you can't do that and people can just kind of peek out, poke you, and then go back to hiding, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. End all be all, use the high explosive. Secondary weapons are also extremely cut and dry because the aim-guided tow missile that you start with is pretty much the only choice and all of the other ones suck. The tow missile is capable of, once again, just like the guided shell, easily taking out helicopters, which are going to be a huge threat considering that any helicopters with the heavy missiles can just flat out basically one-shot kill you by hitting you with all four of their missiles in one pass. So keeping these things in check is really important, and with the aim-guided rockets, you can do that. They're also handy because at further ranges, you can hit enemy vehicles, as well as the fact that the aim-guided tow missiles actually have a decent amount of splash damage, so you can use them as anti-infantry as well. They're just an all-rounder that does everything good, and that just means that the other options kind of suck. Lock guided is basically just the tow missile, but it locks on. This means that you can no longer use it to snipe helicopters, you can no longer use it to shoot infantry, and all you can use it for is to shoot laser designated targets or shoot ground vehicles. And those ground vehicles can just pop smoke, and now they've nullified your first rocket. It does everything the tow missile does, but worse. There's no reason to use it, and, well, I mean, that's the end of it. As for the light rockets, these things are a joke. Seriously, I don't know how these got programmed the way they do. They are desperately in need of a rework because they are horrible. To start off, you get 4, count them, 4 total rockets that fire in a 2-round burst, which means that realistically, you get 2 shots. And those 2 shots are just not very good. They don't do good damage to vehicles, they don't do good damage to infantry, and you don't get any of them. But worst of all, because you only get 4 of them, they only recharge 1 at a time. So once you've fired both of them, you only get 1 back if you don't go to a resupply station. And so when you fire 1 volley after that, you have to wait like 28 seconds to get more. So why the hell would you ever run this over the tow missile? Who knows? The light rockets are horrible, stay away from them. Now, the IFV's Equipment 1 slot is pretty similar to the tank, except for the fact that it unfortunately lacks APS, something that I hope that they'll change sometime in the future. That said, it does have one thing that's different from the tank, and that's the smoke generator. The smoke generator is kind of cool, but at the end of the day is not very good, and I wouldn't recommend it. It basically billows out a huge cloud of smoke that follows your vehicle, so if you drive along a pathway, it will smoke every single area that you drive past. But at the end of the day, not having the ability to immediately break a lock, along with the fact that you need to drive backwards and it's not an immediate smoke screen in front of you, is just not as good as the thermal smoke, so I'd go with that. And as I mentioned with MBTs, emergency repair is useless on these things, so generally just stick with the thermal blocking smoke once you get it. It's the obvious choice. As for Equipment 2, this is once again an extremely obvious choice, and they really need to rebalance some of this stuff because I just keep saying that over and over again. The default proximity threat detector that you have is infinitely better than the counterfire radar. The proxy scan puts a big ol' circle around your vehicle that spots anyone inside of it, which makes clearing out objectives and not getting snuck up on a hell of a lot easier. This thing gives you instant map packs, it's incredibly powerful, and one of the reasons that you may be dying in an IFV is a very possible chance that you're not using this equipment effectively. Seriously, start popping this when you're about to go onto a contested objective and you'll kill everyone on there and they'll have no idea how you knew exactly where they were. That said, the counterfire radar makes it so that way when you activate it, the source of incoming damage is spotted, marking their position in world and on the minimap, which is completely useless. Not only do you have to make sure that you activate this before you've been shot by something to tell you what it is that's dealing damage to you, but also, unless you're completely clueless, 99.9% of the time when you get shot by something in a tank, you're gonna know what shot you. Whether it be the vapor trail from the rocket that just hit you, or the damage indicator that shows you where you got shot from, or maybe the giant tank in front of you that is shooting at you that you're staring right at. Overall, if they wanted this to be even remotely good, they would at least make it active all the time, like it is in Battlefield 2042 on the vehicles that have this exact same system. But no, someone thought it would be a great idea to make this an activatable ability, which is asinine, stupid, and makes it completely worthless, even though if they had done that, it would still be worthless, just maybe less worthless. Stay far away from the counterfire radar, it's awful. Let's once again talk about upgrades. There are some things on here that I've already talked about, most notably field maintenance and reinforced plating. The things that I've said about them still stand, and reinforced plating, as I'm sure you can probably guess, is still the pick compared to these 2 new ones, but let's talk about the 2 new ones. First, targeting jammer. This says that it slows down the enemy's ability to lock on, clears the vehicle's spotted marker sooner, and reduces its heat signature in thermal imaging. To my surprise, all of these things, except for the one thing that I can't really test, which is the fact that the spotted marker goes away sooner, are true. The unfortunate part is that the true parts about them are just not even remotely good and not even remotely helpful. It hides you from thermal imaging. Okay, who cares? There's barely anything in this game that even has thermal imaging, so hiding from it is just not a helpful trait. Being spotted in a vehicle is a no-brainer. You're spotted all the time because everyone sees a vehicle and just presses Q on it. So being unspotted sooner, once again, not helpful, assuming that it even works. But the most hilarious of all is the reduced lock-on time. The only reason that you would run this, and it's awful. The targeting jammer decreases the lock-on time by 0.266 repeating seconds. 0.26 seconds. Are you fucking kidding me? I literally didn't think it worked when I first used it. I was so convinced that it didn't work because I was like, I'm still getting locked on instantly. What the hell's the difference? And the answer is basically nothing. This is in desperate need of a buff. You have got to be kidding me. 0.2 seconds, guys? Did you even check? Who am I kidding? No, you didn't. None of the developers checked any of these things. They just threw them in and hoped they worked. So yeah, targeting jammer, absolutely not. Stay away from it. Now, the systems upgrade is once again very similar to the enhanced loading in the fact that, bafflingly, all of this stuff works. It says that it gives faster cooldowns to equipment in slot 1 and increased range and duration on equipment in slot 2. Now, looking at it after the fact, I'm not entirely sure if the increased range works, but I am certain that the duration and cooldowns do increase. You get about a 25% cooldown reduction to both of your abilities, along with a 25% duration bonus to whatever's in your equipment slot 2. Overall, I think in terms of the cost benefit of having 15% less damage all the time versus having your skills up every once in a while a little bit quicker, maybe if this thing had APS, this might be worth using. So that way you could have a 25% cooldown reduction and a 25% duration bonus on APS, which could be really good, but unfortunately it doesn't have that. So once again, useless. Reinforced plating is the way to go. As for the other equipment on here, the gunner stuff is once again up to personal preference, so I have nothing else to say about it. And the other two weapons, because this game is completely unfinished and they launched it completely unfinished, don't have any customization options and are grayed out. You get a gunner laser designator that you can't change out, so it's always going to be there, and you also get the smoke wall that the tank gets because apparently they thought it would be too overpowered to also give you the potential of having the mine countermeasures on this vehicle, even though it's in the fucking game. Keep it up, guys. Fantastic work. Speaking of fantastic work, we can talk about the light transport category, which has nothing. You can't change anything. Moving on. More hilariously, though, let's talk about the anti-aircraft. By this point, you have long since figured out that the anti-aircraft is fucking horrible. This thing sucks ass. It gets obliterated by the attack jet, it gets obliterated by the attack helicopter, and the tow missiles on the IFV are an infinitely better source of anti-aircraft than the mobile anti-aircraft is, which is so sad. Funnily enough, I've gotten killed more often by people on the stationary tow missile launchers than I have by the anti-aircraft. It's that bad. That said, if you really want to make the AA work, let's talk about it. First, in terms of driver weapons, the first shell that you get, the multi-purpose, is horrendous. Never use this. Once you get away from this, forget it exists, because it's just that bad. It shoots in a burst. It only has like 6 bullets. Those bullets barely do any damage. They fly all over the place, making hitting anything, especially ground targets, incredibly difficult. It's just awful. Things improve substantially with the next option, which is the high velocity and my personal recommendation for the AA. If you want the anti-aircraft to be just that, an anti-aircraft, then the high velocity rounds are the way to go. It turns the AA into probably what it should be from the default. A full auto gun with a whole bunch of ammo that has an overheat. That's how it should work, but that's not what they decided to do. Anyways, even with the high velocity, you're still gonna struggle a lot to kill aircraft, as you'll oftentimes overheat long before you do enough damage to kill any of them. Like I mentioned earlier, you can offset this a lot by going ahead and equipping the Combat Engineer combat path if you have that, although admittedly it's very hard to get right now because the challenge is bugged in 80% of the rounds that you play. Quick little note for if you're trying to complete that challenge that's bugged and you haven't managed to finish it yet, my recommendation is to launch into a game and at the beginning of the round, spawn in as engineer, hop into a Jeep, drive away from your teammates, hop out of the Jeep and wait until it's no longer owned by you, shoot it with an RPG, get in, get out, so that way it's blue, repair it, and then check to see if your repair score is updated on the challenge. If it has, just do that over and over again until you complete the spawn, including just redeploying to get more ammo, and if it doesn't update, then play the round as normal. It's a stupid thing that you have to do, but if you're trying to complete the challenge, that's a way to do it. Anyways, if you do have that combat path, it'll make it so you can shoot the guns way longer before overheating and actually make it halfway decent at killing enemy aircraft. The only thing that you've probably noticed at this point that's kind of problematic is the fact that the screen flashing while you're trying to shoot in full auto is ridiculous, and the screen shake is also ridiculous, which makes it kind of hard to aim. And so aiming in third person is generally preferred, but unfortunately the NATO AA has this big old radar dish that makes it hard to see sometimes, so PAX just kind of gets the edge here. I hope they fix this stuff. In terms of killing other stuff, you are now entirely useless against vehicles, doing basically 0 damage, but against infantry you can fare a little bit better, as if you manage to put the offset correctly with the guns and shoot either to the left or to the right of the target so that way you actually hit it, it does alright damage. As for the final weapon on here, the anti-armor round, it once again fares way better than multi-purpose. This, just like the high velocity, is technically a fully automatic gun, although it shoots very slowly. You've got 8 shots, which is hilarious because that's more than the multi-purpose rounds, but they travel a hell of a lot slower, and in terms of doing damage to aircraft, you're generally going to do less of it. That said, you're capable of dealing all right damage to ground vehicles, but most importantly, dealing half of an infantry's health in a single shot. This is really basically just the anti-infantry rounds for the AA if you're trying to use it that way. But if you're gonna run into tanks, you're never gonna beat them in a one-on-one, so you better hope that you have teammates nearby to help you out. If you haven't used the anti-armor at all, and you don't plan on using the AA too much to try to kill aircraft, and the aircraft in your game just isn't that effective, you can throw on the anti-armor rounds and have a bit of fun. But as I mentioned, this, in terms of the comparison to the IFV or the tank, it's just not even close. Here's the part where I would talk about the secondary weapons system on the AA, if it had a secondary weapons system, but this game was shoved out the door too early and they didn't finish that stuff in time, so it's blanked out and your only option is anti-air missiles. For God's sakes, guys, Battlefield 4 gave us passive guiding rockets and dumbfire missiles, and here you have one thing. One fucking, okay, I can't get hung up on this forever. The equipment one slot is barren. You have a choice between thermal smoke or emergency repair. We've talked about both of those. Thermal smoke is the way to go. But in terms of the upgrades, here's where things get a little bit different than the ones before. The AA doesn't have the enhanced armor plating upgrades that the tank and the IFV have. In fact, it has some of the worst stuff on here. It has the optimized handling that doesn't do anything, the targeting jammer that basically doesn't do anything, the enhanced loading, which works but is just alright, and the systems upgrade, which once again is just okay. It's basically a toss-up between whether or not you want to use the systems upgrade or the enhanced loading, and here's why. I have the wrong things equipped here, but if you're going to be using the anti-armor, you probably want the enhanced loading, and if you're going to be using the high velocity, you'll probably want the systems upgrade. It's a toss-up between these two, and it's entirely up to you which one you want to use. As I've obviously stated, stay the hell away from optimized handling of the targeting jammer. They suck. And surprise, surprise, the last upgrade on the AA, blanked out the radar system. Who gives a shit? The radar doesn't do anything anyway in this game, so whatever. Now, technically, last but not least, attack helicopters. In terms of your primary weapon systems, there's one correct answer, and it's the heavy rockets. The heavy rockets are just so much better than both of the other ones that it's almost hilarious, and it's like they didn't test it. They didn't. Why am I even saying that? Why do I keep saying that? The aim-guided missiles are the default, and honestly, they're not awful. If you know how to aim them properly and you're paying attention to where they land, they can be perfectly fine at killing infantry, but once you get into killing vehicles, you're going to start to feel pretty helpless. Generally speaking, in strafes, I could do up to 250 damage if I hit every single rocket, which, considering that tanks have 1,000 health, yeah, you're not going to kill a tank anytime soon. Better hope your gunner is really good and constantly firing those laser-guided missiles, because the smart rockets ain't going to cut it there. But honestly, like I said, for beginner equipment, if you can learn how to aim them, they're not horrible, but the heavy rockets are just so much better that there's no reason to run them. In terms of the light rockets, these things are horrible, and there is absolutely zero reason to run these. Not only do these heavily suffer from 2042 syndrome, where they shoot out from the left and the right of the helicopter so far that if you aim directly at your target, you're never going to hit it, but also they just don't do any damage to, like, anything. They're not all that great against killing infantry, and they're awful at killing aircraft, and they're awful at killing land vehicles. They're just awful. Don't use the light rockets. The heavy rockets, on the other hand, are hilariously overtuned, incredibly broken, and the best thing in the category. You only get 4 of them, which I guess is supposed to be the drawback here, but the heavy rockets are capable of 4-shot killing, which means 1 volley instantly kills the anti-aircraft and the IFV. If you hit it in the back, you can do the same to the tanks, but generally speaking, you'll do around 900 something damage to the tanks, which means they're on their death's door anyway. If you're using the aim-guided secondary weapon, you can basically insta-kill any vehicle in the game immediately. And on the anti-infantry front, if you hit close enough to infantry, you can one-shot kill them. And if you land the splash damage, you're generally going to do about half their health, which means that if the first shot doesn't kill them, the second shot is definitely going to kill them. The heavy rockets are an anti-everything. They're the answer. Pick them and stay away from the other ones. Secondary weapons is a little bit more nuanced. The default anti-air missiles are honestly not bad, and I don't blame people at all for sticking with them. Because air combat can be so janky in this game, and most importantly, because jets are probably going to be the thing that kills you the most in the helicopter, assuming that someone on the ground hasn't figured out how broken the tow missiles are, the anti-air missiles are just about your only defense a lot of the time against an even remotely competent jet player. And while, of course, you're usually not going to kill the jet, at the very least, if you can make it run away, it means you're not going to die to it. This also applies to anti-helicopter, because if you're able to lock onto a helicopter from further away and knock them out, or at least pop their flares, they're going to have to run away, which gives you the advantage. Overall, the anti-air missiles aren't bad, but I personally go with the aim-guided missiles because I just think they're more fun. The aim-guided tow missiles in this game are very similar to all of the other aim-guided missiles. They go towards your crosshair, and they do a boatload of damage. If you can aim them, you can use them to take out enemy helicopters, and if you're really lucky, an enemy jet. It's a little bit janky to try to hit ground targets with the missiles, but once you get used to it, you can hit them to do a very sizable amount of damage, and basically guarantee that they're going to die to the next strafe you do on them. I haven't mentioned it up until this point, but the aim-guided missiles say that they can lock on to laser-designated targets. I'm pretty sure this just isn't working right now. Maybe they'll fix it, or maybe they'll just remove it from the description. Who knows? But as of right now, it's basically non-functional. Anyways, point is, picking between the two of them, it's really up to you. I like the aim-guided. I think it's fun, but if you're not so great in the helicopters, anti-air, probably the way to go. Flares is grayed out because the game is unfinished and they forgot that ECM existed from previous games, so there's nothing there. As for the equipment 2, this is hilarious, and the fact that there's even an option here is just hysterical. What the fuck are they doing? Unlike with tanks, the emergency repair in the helicopter is invaluable, and if you're not running it, you might as well be throwing the game. There are so many things that can do damage to you in the helicopter, and there's a lot of things that can do a lot of damage to you in the helicopter that will make it so that way your helicopter gets disabled and it starts going into a tailspin. You can counteract the tailspin if you know what you're doing, but the best thing to do when you get into a tailspin is to just immediately pop the emergency repair, which will pull you out of it and fix it. On top of course, giving you extra health, which, if you're trying to get away, can be the difference between life and death. Now, I just talked about how good the emergency repair is. What if you wanted to equip ground target detection system? You're an idiot. If you did that, you're an idiot. This tracks and identifies the location of enemy infantry and vehicles, but the attack helicopter is more vulnerable to lock-on weapons. Now, what the hell that even means, I don't care. This piece of equipment is worthless, and if you're running it instead of the emergency repair, you're throwing. I've been saved by the emergency repair probably 100 times already, so don't use target detection. It's bad. Use the emergency repair. You're welcome. As for the upgrade system, we get to talk about some useless stuff once again, starting with the radar system. We're not even trying. We're legitimately just not even trying at this point. Enables air and ground radar. Well, the air radar basically does not work at all in this game, and the minimap's so small that even if it does work, it doesn't matter because you're never gonna see anything coming for you. This is an eyesight-based game until they fix that stuff, so the air radar is useless. As for the ground radar, once again, do you have eyes? It's not hard to find the ground vehicles in this game, and if you need a radar to find it, you're probably in trouble anyway. The radar system is horrible, don't run it. Simple as that. Heavy warheads is interesting, and I can potentially see why people would run it, but I'll explain what it does and why I don't. This advertises an increased blast radius and lethality of primary weapon payloads as well as ammo capacity, but diminishes the aircraft maneuverability. Now, in terms of the blast radius, I couldn't really tell the difference between the default one and the heavy warheads. Maybe this is just because my aim is relatively good with the helicopters, so I'm usually one-shotting people anyway, or the fact that if I'm not one-shotting people, I'm firing enough missiles that everything's going to die regardless. But what it ends up coming down to is I can't tell the difference between the blast radius. It might be there, it might not be, I don't know. That said, I can say that the lethality of the primary weapon payloads is unaffected in terms of direct hits to enemy vehicles. It does the exact same damage whether you're running anything else or the heavy warheads. The handy thing on heavy warheads, though, is the fact that it does increase your ammo capacity. It brings the heavy rockets up from a 4-missile barrage to a 5-missile barrage, and honest to God, that 5th missile can be pretty helpful. I mentioned earlier that the main battle tanks can barely survive a strafe, and if you've got 5 missiles, if you hit them all, now they can't survive a strafe. But the main reason that I don't use the heavy warheads is the fact that even though I can't really test it, it genuinely feels, from a strictly conjecture standpoint, that the helicopter flies worse, and considering that helicopters in this game already fly like boats, I do not want to make my maneuverability worse. It also helps that the improved armor upgrade that we're going to be talking about is really helpful. So considering the fact that that doesn't have a drawback, and this does, whether or not it works, I choose to go with the other one. That said, if people are willing to take the maneuverability hit and don't care about the stuff that I'll be talking about in improved armor, I can see why heavy warheads would get some players and would have some people use it. Really, if the diminishes aircraft maneuverability wasn't there, I think there would be a genuinely good choice between this and improved armor, but they didn't seem to have a good idea of balancing this stuff in mind when they made it, pretty obviously, so I'd recommend staying away from it. But at the end of the day, it's up to you, so if you want to give it a shot, go for it. In terms of useless, we can talk about targeting interference. Slows the enemy's ability to acquire a lock-on, but deactivates if the aircraft travels too slowly. Well, we already talked about how useless the stealth coding, or whatever the hell it's called in this game, is on the other stuff, and I'm almost 100% certain that it's the exact same bullshit on the helicopters, as the short period that I ran this, I still got locked on instantly by the AA, so it meant nothing. And considering the fact that the improved armor, which we're about to talk about, is just so much better, yeah, forget targeting interference. I keep talking about it, so improved armor. It says that improves armor resistance against most infantry weapons, and boy does it. Seriously, this thing gives you a 50% decrease to incoming small arms damage. And I'm fairly certain that this also applies to enemy vehicles that are shooting machine guns at you, and I'm also fairly certain that it applies to the anti-aircraft weapons, which already suck, as I've mentioned, and now they suck even more. Seriously, a 50% damage decrease is insane and a no-brainer, considering how often, if you've flown helicopters, you know that people in tank gunners will just shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot at you, and it's really, really annoying without this, but once you have it, they can't do a whole lot of damage anymore. It's incredibly helpful, and I'd highly recommend going with improved armor over any of these other options. Here's where I'd talk about the gunner customization. If we had gunner customization, how many fucking times am I gonna say this? Seriously, there's one weapon for the bottom. Okay, well, you know, we've had that in every other game. You'd think that maybe this game could buck the trend and give us a couple different options than the default autocannon, but no, we don't get that, so whatever, who cares? But the secondary weapon, all it has is lock-on missiles. Not only does it have lock-on missiles, it says they're aim-guided, but they aren't. Why does it even say they're aim-guided if they aren't? It's even more of a sick joke because we know they have the technology for TV-like missiles from the campaign, but there's no TV missile on the helicopter. Come on, guys, are we even trying? And that's it for the attack helicopters. So let's talk about transport helicopters. Oh, nothing. All right, sure. How about attack jets? Oh, nothing, huh? All right, fine. Fighter jet? Fighter jet, nothing. Well, that was easy. I guess we're done here.